is terrible to keep water. He had this ability to keep going back to his own strengths, thinking of what was worked for him. And it worked many times, but not every time. In some ways, his life is like the old story of the mule, the donkey. I recall somebody would say that proverb. There was once a donkey who was weighed down with this massive load on his back, and he went down to the creek to get a break, to get a drink of water, and he got wet. And I'm not talking like Episcopalian wet with a few sprinkles, it's Church of Christ wet, like all the way in, fully submerged. That's an Episcopalian joke today. I thought it was a nice touch. He was all the way in the water, fully submerged, and he comes out of the water, and all of a sudden this load on his back that was so heavy and burdensome is gone. And so the next day, loaded up again, goes into the creek and says, no, I'm going to do the same thing I did yesterday. Goes all the way in, fully submerged, and the weight on his back is gone. So he thinks he's got something figured out. So the next day, he goes, same thing, drinks some water, but goes fully submerged all the way in, and all of a sudden, the load on his back triples in weight. Because he doesn't realize the first day he was carrying salt, and the second day he was carrying sugar, but this third day he's carrying mounds of fabric. And what lightened his load before eventually becomes the very thing that burdens him down more. That's the story of Samson. He has this peculiar problem with women that he shouldn't be with. The story last week is this woman was a woman he shouldn't have married. He marries her anyway. It creates this huge problem. Plays one of his riddles, and eventually people die. His girl that he falls in love with, her and her family die, and he's okay though. He gets out of it. The next woman he meets is a sex worker. He's with her, and the people from her town in the southernmost part of their community is a town called Gaza. They're waiting for him in the early morning, but he doesn't stay till the early morning. He leaves in the middle of the night. Picks up the gates of the town and marches all the way, 40 miles away uphill. He's gotten out of the second trap. But the third trap that he falls in is with a woman named Delilah. That word Delilah, we're not exactly sure what it means, but some think it's connected to the Aramaic word for flirt. Not so much in the positive English sense, but more devious. And that's exactly what happens in the story. So Deuteronomy, Judges chapter 16, verse 4. After this feast, Samson fell in love with a woman in the valley of Shor, whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came to her and said to her, coax him and find out what makes his strength so great, and how we may overpower him, so that we may bind him in order to subdue him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Samson has this miraculous birth story, which is very similar to Jesus' birth story. And just like Jesus, who was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, Samson will be betrayed for silver as well. And so this woman, Delilah, that he's fallen in love with, says, tell me the secret of your strength. And so he plays his games again. He plays his riddles. Tells her lies. 3 lies. First he says, well, if it's 7 bowstrings that tie me up, I'm powerless. So he goes to sleep. She does this. She wakes him up and says, hey, look, the Philistines are here to get you. And he breaks him free. Then she says, well, no, tell me what it really is. And then he says, well, if it's 7 new ropes, then I will be powerless. Same story plays out. He falls asleep. She ties him up. He wakes up, breaks the ropes. He's fine. Third time, what is it really? Samson says, you know what? If you braid my hair in 7 braids, then I am powerless. Again, she wakes him up in the middle of the night. Philistines appear, but he is free. And so this is what she says to him next. How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me 3 times now and have not told me what makes your strength so great. What I love about this is she's not going to acknowledge, hey, I tried to kill you 3 times. Right? This is all on you, Samson. What is wrong with you? 3 times you mocked me, and this is what happens next, verse 16. Finally, after she had nagged him with her words day after day and pestered him, he was tired to death. So the man who is super strong becomes super weak, and he tells her exactly what it is. Samson from birth was dedicated. He was a Nazarite, which literally means he was consecrated to So he's never supposed to be unclean or around dead bodies, which he was. Not supposed to drink alcohol, which we're not sure if he did or didn't, but we probably assume he didn't. And the other thing he was never supposed to do was have his hair cut, because that actually was the secret of his strength. The one thing we know for sure, he never broke of the vow that his mom made as he was born, was to never cut his hair. And this is what happens next, verse 17. So he told her his whole secret, and said to her, a razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, then my strength would leave me. I would become weak and be like anyone else. When Delilah realized that he had told her his whole secret, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, this time come up, for he has told his whole secret to me. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to him and brought the money in her hands. She let him fall asleep on her lap, and she called the man, and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. He began to weaken, and his strength left him. Then she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. When he awoke from his sleep, he thought, I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. So the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes. They brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles, and he ground at the mill in the prison. So finally, his secret is out. He's caught after his head is shaved, and they pluck out his eyes. The dark irony of the story is, for his entire life, he did what his eyes told him was good. He did what was right in his own eyes. And if his eyes had been gouged out long before, he would never have ended up in this situation. But they do. He is caught. And finally, he's gone down to the river one too many times. His riddles have finally caught up with him. His games that he's played, eventually he ends up on the short side of it. He's stuck. And the saddest part of the story is what we just read in verse 20. Let's go back to that verse 20. When he awoke from his sleep, he thought, I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. He didn't know. He didn't know it was all gone. It's like the story that Jesus tells of the prodigal son. The son who disrespects his father, disrespects his family, takes his inheritance, goes off and lives this wild life. And you can imagine him every night. He's out having fun with his friends, and he reaches into his wallet and grabs some money and pays for everything. Night after night. Friends, having fun, he reaches in the wallet, grabs money. Friends, fun, reaches for his wallet, and eventually one night he reaches into his wallet, and there's nothing left. So all of the friends leave, and the fun dries up, because he didn't realize it was gone. Samson didn't realize it was all gone. Now, this story is thousands of years old. And none of us can relate to Samson's Herculean strength. We can't relate to the magical powers of hair, but we can all probably relate to it. It was maybe one time too many. We thought everything was just going to be fine. And you just kept doing what you always did. And then finally, you're stuck. Finally, stuck. And you only realize how bad it is. The book of Judges has the Israelites kind of go down this dark, cyclical path, and things just get worse and worse and worse. The judges get worse and worse and worse throughout the book. Ehud, the first judge of the book, was physically limited, but his heart, his character was amazing. And you get the same thing. He's the total opposite. He was physically gifted, but his heart, his character is deeply lacking. And Israel just gets worse and worse and worse. And in some ways, this story of Samson deliver, someone to Hosanna, to deliver them. But at the beginning of the Samson story, something changes in the cycle. Let's go to chapter 13. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 4 years, for a generation. That's normal. But there's something missing right here. There was a certain man, Zorah, of the tribe of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was there, having born the judge, this is the one who's going to deliver them, but there's something in the middle that's missing. They stopped asking for help. It got me so bad, they stopped even asking for things to be better. You know it's bad, and you just don't realize how bad it's gotten because you don't even ask for it to get better. I can imagine if people can relate to that. You go back to the well and you don't even realize that the well is empty, that your soul is bankrupt. You're not even asking for help anymore. It happens to each and every one of us. You don't realize it's gotten that bad until you realize you're not even asking things to be better. At least accept it. Let me show you this video. It's a video of some teenage girls in a parking lot. I think the parking lot is for a Target. And take a look at what these teenage girls are doing in this shopping cart. Okay, so they're in the shopping cart, spinning around. Okay, play one more time. They're just spinning around, going around this little circle. Just having a good old time, as many do on a Friday night. Target parking lot, just get in there with your friends, spin around. But what no one imagines when you get into a Target shopping cart and spin yourself around with your friends is that you would ever get stuck. Like you couldn't get out. Like you were stuck in there with your friend, and so this is what happens next. You have to call the firefighters. Stuck. It's not easy to ask for help. Because to get you out of a broken cycle like that, it's not easy. They put a God between the girls, they put a brace, a back brace between them so they could cut it open. It's not easy to break a cycle like that when you get stuck. There's a book that came out a few years ago. I love the book. It's called The Power of Habit by a writer named Charles Duhigg. Charles Duhigg writes a beautiful book about how we find ourselves stuck in habits and cycles. And so Duhigg tells a story on himself where he's a writer and he found himself in a cycle where every afternoon he would break from writing. Now, writing is a lonely,